All right, so the Dungeons and Dragons channel put out a video on how to become a dungeon master. So let's go ahead and see what they have to say about the topic.
So we have several chapters in the new Dungeon Master's Guide that kind of cover how to learn to be a dungeon master. And that's very, very well outlined and researched. And you have like 10 years of additional...
I have DM'd once or twice.
You have to...
Yeah, once or twice, sure.
Possibly
That's what I
a few
say
more
too.
times than that.
Did you get new ideas on, like, talking to the audience right now, how to become a dungeon master while you were researching for the new DMG? Did new things come to light?
As I've been DMing over the past 10 years, and as I've been watching other people DM over the past 10 years, whether in person, at conventions, or online, I have been taking notes in the possible eventuality of being able to revisit the DMG and incorporate some new learnings.
All right, so right off the bat, that's a fantastic sign. One of the best ways to pick up tips and tricks for being a dungeon master is by watching other people, do it. And I don't mean like watching, actually like listening to or watching to actual play podcasts. While that is a good idea, it will help in some scenarios. If you're new, if you're just starting out, it's sometimes best to see how other new dungeon masters start out, and they're, doing it, because people who have been doing it for over 10 years, like, I already forgot his name because I'm bad with names. I think it's Christopher, whatever. Matt Mercer, Brennan Lee Mulligan, myself, we all made mistakes in the beginning. And we all make mistakes now, but significantly less mistakes. And for the most part, we know what we're doing. So even if we do make a mistake, we're better at brushing the mistake under the rug so nobody really notices it. And you're not going to pick up a whole lot from that. But if you're at a convention and that convention happens to have a Dungeons and Dragons room, so like most Comic-Cons and lately a fair amount of anime conventions, and I didn't make it to Magic Con because I'm a broke boy, but I'm sure Magic Con had some Dungeons and Dragons tables going, and watching, amateur, I know it sounds kind of rude, but amateur dungeon masters DM is going to teach you some neat tricks, going to show you mistakes that other people make that you might make that you can try and avoid. But also watching more experienced DMs do it as well will definitely help. So I also do obviously recommend watching or listening to actual play podcasts. I like actually watching the live stream of Critical Role just because the movements they make, the faces they make are hilarious to me. And you never know what's going to get cut out for the podcasts because they do, believe it or not, cut a fair amount out to save time. But that's fantastic. Always, if you can't sit down and play, but you've got time to kill and you're at a convention, watch some of the DMs there and see what they do. It will definitely help you up your DM game.
And things like that. So yes, just like painting or writing or any other artistic enterprise, DMing is something where you're constantly learning new tricks, picking up new
big facts,
tips from the people that you admire or you think are doing a really good job. Not every DM is the same.
Yeah.
Even people who are doing bad jobs, you can learn something from.
In fact, unique.
Guarantee it.
But there's a lot to be learned by watching people DM and by being DM'd. When I'm DM'd by somebody like Jeremy Crawford, or when I watch a DM like Deborah Ann Wall, there are moments when I go, oh, that was really clever how they did that. Or, I can see the reason why they did this instead of that, given that the group that they're with or the performance they're trying to engender, that kind of.
Yeah, see, the reason why I say that watching new DMs do it or less experienced DMs do it is because he understands why the more experienced DMs are doing the things that they're doing, going the route they're going, because he's been DMing for over 10 years, As a new DM, you might not understand fully what's going on because you're just now stepping into the field, right? It's like, say you're going into computer science work, like cybersecurity. Somebody who's been doing it for 10 plus years knows all these shortcuts and these tips and tricks that they can do. But if you watch them do it, you won't fully understand what they're doing until you've been in the field for a little while. It's the same thing with DMing. DMing's significantly less complicated, but it's the same thing. If you're watching somebody who's been doing it for over 10 years, you may not understand all the nuances of the way they do it. You will eventually with practice, but you won't understand why they're doing what they're doing. If you try to emulate that, the chances of you doing it wrong and upsetting people at the table or confusing people at the table is significantly increased. So I heavily recommend not trying to emulate some of your favorite professional DMs, but I mean, teach their own, right?
Kind of thing. So for me, it was really just an opportunity to take all these notes and teachings and just codify them. Being very selective, mind you, because with a book, you've got a limited amount of space.
Yeah.
And so knowing that what goes in the DMG should feel tried and true,
Absolutely.
I tried to cherry pick the best of what I've seen and observed and tried these past 10 years.
What do you say to people now when they want to become a dungeon master? If they reach out, or you know someone who's dungeon mastering for the first time?
Yeah. The first thing I say is you're going to have a blast. It's a ton of fun. No matter how it plays out or whatever.
Look, you'll probably have a blast. I know a lot of people who've tried DMing and they hated it, right? It's not hard, but it can be difficult, right? Those are two separate things, two completely different things, believe it or not. And don't feel bad if you don't understand how to do it. Don't feel bad if you didn't have fun, right? It's Dungeons and Dragons is something where we should all be having fun, from the DM to every single player, to even if we've got some people watching us or listening in. I audio record all of my sessions because my son likes to hear it, right? It's better than reading a book at bedtime, you know? And so everyone should be able to enjoy that. And if you're DMing and you're not having a fun time, you're not enjoying it, that's okay. That's okay. I would say give it at least 3 sessions before you decide definitively that it's not for you, but you might not have a blast. That is what he's saying is not inherently, intrinsically correct. Lots of people don't enjoy DMing, and that's okay. If you don't enjoy it, that's fine. Somebody else at the table might. But I always recommend everyone try it, for at least 3 sessions. Give your forever DM a break and let them, be a player. But, teach their own.
It's going to be such an interesting and wonderful experience.
It's definitely interesting.
Because
not always
you're
wonderful.
going to be putting yourself in a position where you get to share a story with a group of folks and then watch it evolve in real time. And there's not many expressions out there that give you that kind of joy or experience. So that's the first thing I say. First thing I say is you're going to have a blast. It's going to be a lot of fun. And be careful, you might get addicted.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm addicted. I love
And then the
DMing.
second
I'm
thing
a
I
forever
say
DM all
is,
day, every day.
Prep as much as you want, but don't feel like you have to anticipate everything. Because part of the fun of DMing is kind of just thinking on your feet and watching things go the way they'll go.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. You never want to over prep. I've been guilty of over prepping before, and it gets if you over prep, you're gonna get frustrated when your players derail the campaign, and they're going to. It's just what players do, right? If you're DMing, chances are you've been a player before. You know the players derail the campaign. It's their job practically, right? They do it like their lives depend on it. And if you over prep, you're gonna get really frustrated because you're gonna end up with like a notebook full of the way you want it to go, and you're not gonna get to go that way. My biggest tip is always have a beginning, have an end, and just sprinkle in some plot points in between, and let your players do what they're gonna do. Be ready to improvise because you're gonna have to improvise. If you're no good at improvising, well, YouTube improv classes, I guarantee you it'll be a lifesaver if you really want to DM. But improvisation is one of the biggest, best tools you can have in your toolbox as a dungeon master, because you're going to need to do it every session. I guarantee it. I've never once had a session where I didn't have to think on my feet and improvise, because players are monsters. I love them to death, but they're monsters. So be ready for that.
It's a bit of a dance.
It is, yes. And until you really kind of settle in and get to know your players' tastes, you're going to be taking just some shots in the dark.
Oh, absolutely.
And not everything is going to Not everything you think is going to be super cool is going to be as cool as you think. And some things you thought that you never expected to be cool are going to be even cooler than you think. I think that just preparing new DMs by saying it's going to be a fun ride, even if you're not sure where the destination is yet.
I think the most surprising thing to me, probably still to this day, is how much people glob onto NPCs I create. So I think about the story, I think about, obviously I think about the characters they're going to interact with, but there are many characters who have persisted well beyond the plan because of the affection the players have, or the hatred
No,
of an NPC.
that's absolutely true. If you make an NPC that's interesting or lovable, your players are going to want to keep that NPC around. If they hate the NPC, the chances of that NPC making it past that session are very slim because they're going to want to kill him off. And I love it when I make like a shopkeeper that's like a real asshole that the players end up hating, because then I'll make them keep going to that shopkeep as often as I can, just to irritate them like they irritate me when they, derail the campaign. So you're going to want to make sure, if you use accents like I do for your NPCs, you're going to remember the accent you use for each individual NPC, especially if they like them, because they're going to be around for a long time. So be ready with names, be ready with backstories. I make a bunch of character sheets just in case they try and drag an NPC around. That way I can remember everything. I don't have to try and memorize it. I've got it written down. So that's part of prep as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, no, players pick up NPCs like my wife picks up stray cats. We've in the years we've been married, we've had several cats. Your players are going to want to pick up a couple of your NPCs. I guarantee it. So be ready for that.
See,
another tip that I like to give new DMs is ask the players what they want. Have a conversation before you're actually planning to run the game and say, hey, I'd like to DM a game for you guys. What kind of fun are you looking for? That's not a bad way to start either.
So that's part of session 0, right? Which, when I sit down for session 0, I've already got the campaign, the beginning of the campaign and the end of the campaign planned out. So what I'm asking my players is less of what kind of fun you want to have and more of, hey, this campaign, do you want it to be more like action based, just get right into the fighting and just do nothing but fighting, like fight every single session? Or do you want it to be heavy roleplay or a mixture of the two? Because there's so many different ways you can play Dungeons & Dragons. Most of my players love the roleplay aspect of the game, because we're all sad adults, and we like to get away from our sad adult life by playing Dungeons & Dragons, right? But occasionally I'll go to like a games shop, and the game shop will ask me to DM a table for them one night for Adventures League, and it'll be like a bunch of kids. And so I asked them, well, what do you guys want for this one-shot campaign? Do you want it to be full of action? Do you want it to be role-play? And they always want action, right? Occasionally they want like a mixture of the two, but it's usually just action. Fight, because they're young. That's what they want. So that's what I do when I'm talking to my players, when I'm asking my players what they want. It's just, do you want more role-play or more combat or an even balance of the two? Because most of the time, aside from that, most of the time the players don't know what they want from a campaign. Like, they just want to play. They don't want to have to think about the campaign or what's going into the campaign. That's why they're not DMing, right? They don't know what they want. And that's okay, because while we don't know what they want either, we're writing the story, and they're along for the ride. They're making it more interesting, but aside from what kind of play style they want, they don't know what they want. I've never met a player that was like, I want this kind of campaign. I want these enemies in this terrain. No, they don't know what they want. Occasionally they'll be like, oh, I want this campaign module. Let's do the Curse of Strahd campaign module. Okay, you hate yourself. That's fine. We can do that. But most of the time, they don't know what they want.
Well, it's a great thing to provide people like a bespoke story experience, instead of just shoving them into something you were thinking about.
Right, yes. And one of the things that we emphasize in the early chapters of the new Dungeon Master's Guide is that understanding your players' tastes and preferences contributes to the success of your game.
Yeah, but you'll
Can
get
you
that
still
by
remember the
playing
first time
with
you
them.
dungeon
They won't
mastered?
tell you.
Vaguely, yes.
Yeah, I still remember where I was.
Yeah, it wasn't an ideal, what I'd call an ideal play experience, because it was me and one player.
Right.
And that one player was playing all the characters in the party.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, that's
yeah,
hard.
So
that's
now this was first
disgusting.
edition.
Yeah.
So the characters were kind of like shells of characters. They didn't have much identity. There was
Yeah.
the fighter.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, first edition
there
was a
the magic
nightmare.
user,
Like, it
there
was
the
fun,
cleric,
but it was
there
a
the
nightmare.
rogue. And I remember the player had a personality for the main character that he liked, and then the others were just kind of nobodies. But that was fun because neither of us really knew exactly what we were doing. I as the DM and him as the player, we were just rolling dice and having fun.
Yeah.
And only later did we realize there's a bunch of stuff we weren't doing right. At least not within the context as the rules is written.
Yeah, you'll make mistakes
matter.
your first time.
No, it's very
You'll make mistakes your first time being a DM, and that's okay. Like I said in the beginning, mistakes happen. You have to make the mistakes to learn, and you'll do things wrong. But as long as you do them wrong in a way that it doesn't stop gameplay as a whole, you'll be all right, and you'll learn as you go, and that's okay. The first time I DM'd, I was fresh out of the military, right? I was not in a good mindset because I had been medically discharged, so I was like depressed and whatnot because of that. And you know, I had played D&D a little bit while I was in the military, but my friends wanted to play, and so I DM'd for them, which I had never done before, and I made a lot of mistakes. But we all still had fun, and I realized the mistakes I made going back and thinking about each session. So I learned from those mistakes, and I think the best way to learn what not to do is by doing it on your own, right? Obviously, there's some big glaring mistakes that can be sidestepped and not done as a whole, but little mistakes here and there are okay. You're gonna make them, and you'll learn from them, and that's the best way to learn.
very much a learn as you go game.
Yes, and it's technically not wrong if you're all having fun.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the wonderful thing about D&D is, yes, there are rules, and if you choose not to follow them, but you're still having fun, congratulations. You had a successful game of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Here.
I don't know that I ever got a full grasp of the rules for quite some time, just session to session, and
Yeah.
you were learning
I
so
believe
fast.
that.
You're looking up a rule.
I don't doubt that.
You're finding the information, and then that process just kind of
Yeah.
solidifies it in your brain.
Exactly. And I remember my early DM experiences where I would pretty much just run all the monsters the same way.
Yeah.
Like, you come into the room, the monster attacks. You go into the next room, the monster attacks.
Yeah.
And it fights until it's dead. And then you go
Yeah.
and you get your XP and you go off and keep on going.
Yeah.
And it became this sort of test of how far can you get into the dungeon before you said enough is enough. I've learned.
Yeah,
over
and that's
years
just
to
such
add
a
layers
rough
of
way to
nuance
play.
and a little bit
That's
more
so hard on
complexity
you and your
variety.
players.
Not really how you run things now.
No, not so much. And I'm much better at inserting things into a campaign that I know my players will be jazzed about or will terrify them. Whereas before, I was quite content just to sort of randomly throw stuff in the dungeon and just see how it plays out.
Yeah. And you've told me stories about your own campaign, and it is very clear how bespoke that everything is. Like, you have definitely made this about the players, and you delight when you're telling these stories. You added this plotline or this NPC interacted with them in this way, and you have like a kind of a cackle in your eyes because it had such an effect on the players. And that seems to be like your main drug right now.
Sure, and I find that true of many DMs that I talk to. It's when I'm talking to them about their home play experiences, I see that gleam in their eyes when they get to the good parts.
Yeah, being able to do something that personal for someone on a weekly
Yes.
basis is extremely powerful.
Right. The other thing that I say is with a DM is there are different kinds of D&D experiences. There's the long-running campaign, for instance, and
Yeah.
then there's the one-off, and both are valid. And so if you're a DM,
He didn't touch on it. He might in a bit. I don't know. I'm getting impatient with this, the way he talks. But yeah, there's the long running campaign, like all 3 seasons of Critical Role. And yeah, there's the one shots that tend to be like 2 shots because, you know, reasons we've all played. But then there's something to be said for the short slash medium length campaigns. I've had a campaign that lasted 30 sessions, and every session was about 4 hours, and it was great. It was amazing. We all loved it. And it was one of those things where nobody was getting tired of the campaign because it ended at 30. Whereas with Critical Role, a lot of my players, if we went as long as they did, where they're at what episode, they're session 90 something now, I think. Most of my players get bored after 60 sessions, and it's like we don't do long. I try and keep them between 30 and 45 because they want something new. If you're not gonna read a 3,000 page book, if it's more than 1,000, you're gonna look at it and be like, oh, that's a little long, right? Just like with One Piece, people look at One Piece and go, ooh, it's over 1,000 episodes. No, that's too long, right? It's the same thing with D&D sessions or D&D campaigns, right? Some people love the super long ones. I've had a couple people ask me to do long running campaigns that are over 100 sessions, and I always put it to a vote at my table. It's like, who wants the long, who wants short, who wants medium. Let's compromise. So that's another question that you should ask your players before starting a campaign: is how long of a campaign do they want, and try and keep it around what they want, so that way they don't lose interest, they don't get bored.
And you're not sure how far down the rabbit hole you want to go, just run a runoff. Oh, sorry, run a one-off.
Yeah.
And see how it goes. If the players really like it, then you can, set a follow-up adventure, and suddenly you're got the early makings of a campaign. But if you sense that it's not quite right for you, you can go back and rethink things and not feel like you're trapped
Right.
In doing something over and over and over again.
Yeah, for a lot of campaigns, I don't do a ton of work until the first few sessions, and then I know what the story is going to be based off what those characters turned out to be.
Yeah. I used to be a DM who tried to plot out the entire campaign.
Don't do that,
in
guys.
advance.
Yeah.
Don't do
And I
that.
abandoned that.
Beginning and
after
end.
It turned
That's
out
it. That's
more
all you
often
need.
than not to be a futile, well, not entirely not fun, but ultimately pointless
Yeah.
exercise.
That's its own metagame, though, also for a dungeon master.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about you doing this plot line, but you're
Yes.
writing a plot line on your own.
Yes.
Gives
Yeah.
you a sense of where things can
Some
go.
of the stuff I've enjoyed a lot about DMing is stuff that never actually got to the table.
Yeah.
It never actually entered play or was run. Just like my mind starts racing with ideas, and that is an engaging activity for me, even if not all of them end up getting played.
That's something that probably doesn't get talked about enough about being a dungeon master is you are never bored. Because you can always be thinking about the campaign.
Yes.
It doesn't matter where you are.
Yes.
It's the first mobile device, your own imagination.
Oh, that's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah, I'm always filling my head with like potential plots and things that could happen in a game if I have some downtime.
Yes, me too. And even today, after DMing for over 40 years, it's still a mental activity that I enjoy. And sometimes I'll even write out little plots of things, like I'll jot down notes of things that could happen in future adventures or later in the campaign. And there's no expectation that they will happen, but I just like dreaming of the possibilities. Something that we mentioned in the DMG 2024 is just thinking about what ifs. You're trying to figure out where the campaign could go. Just start asking yourself a bunch of what if questions. What if that NPC who appeared in the third, game that you ran suddenly reappeared, months later?
That's a fantastic tip right there. Especially if you're getting writer's block, like 12 sessions into your campaign. Asking yourself what if questions is a great literary device, whether it's DMing, being a player, trying to decide what you want to do in a given situation, writing a book. It's just fantastic. He's spot on with that one.
To hound the characters. What if this villain they thought was dead wasn't in fact dead? What if something they did 2 sessions ago had an unintended consequence that they now have to deal with? I find the what if a very engaging and entertaining thought exercise.
Yeah. I took a very big plot turn because the characters they defeated the big
Yeah.
bad, and the way the big bad got defeated was pretty brutal. And so, and this isn't how typically red caps work, but I thought, well, this person was like a demigod. What happens when a red cap comes out of the murder of a demigod? How powerful is that red cap?
Yeah.
It's just this absurdist idea, and I couldn't let go of having that. I love starting the next season of a campaign, kind of.
Yes.
With the right repercussions of winning.
Yeah.
And if that's damaging or that's a good thing, I always feel like that's a nice slow lead into the next
Yes.
season.
I think another great thing about a Dungeon Master's Guide, and that's certainly true of the new one, is that there is plenty of fodder there to fuel your what-if imagination.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, the characters may be, halfway through the campaign and they've probably amassed a lot of treasure and things, but you might decide on a whim that one of the items they've had in their possession for a long time is a sentient item. And it hasn't manifested its sentience or displayed its sentience, but you just decide on a whim that you're going to have an item, be it a belt or a talisman or a weapon, suddenly become a sentient item. That's sort of one of 100 things that I sort of keep on my list of things to do to my future players, is to change the truth of something to create a new situation in the campaign.
Well, that is a great trick to keep in your back pocket. Keep in mind continuity. By that I mean, if somebody does an Arcana check or they do a detect magic or any of that kind of stuff to figure out exactly what the item is, and you don't say anything about its sentience then, and then you try and change it later, that causes a continuity error, and it's just kind of like bad. It's frowned upon. I don't recommend it. It's going to irritate your players. It's going to make them mad. It's going to make them not have as much fun because this weapon that they inspected very thoroughly, and it had, you said, nothing about any kind of sentience, which would have shown up on some of the ways that they would go about finding out what it is. And now all of a sudden it's sentient. It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. So if you're going to use that trick, make sure you're keeping track of what magic items they have that they haven't done any kind of check on, that they haven't tried to figure out what it is. If they've gone out of their way to try and figure out exactly what it is, and at the time of receiving it, at the time of figuring out what it is, you don't say anything about sentience, it's not going to make a whole lot of sense to shoehorn that in. And if you do it, it's going to ruffle some feathers, and you're in for a bad time.
And that idea might only come to me while I'm surfing through the DMG and I get to the sentient magic items section and go, oh yeah, I don't have one of these in the campaign yet. I'm going to find a home for that.
I love this Dungeon Master's Guide. It's such an easy read and such an inspiring read.
Yeah.
It does provoke you to daydream quite a bit.
Particularly in the early chapters, we wanted not only to demystify DMing and to make it as alluring a prospect as possible, but I think we wanted to just sprinkle in as many little things about DMing that a lot of experienced DMs take for granted, but is like a perk of DMing. I'm hopeful that people will actually take the time to read those chapters, because they'll find these little bits in there that go, oh, that's something that the DM does that's actually a lot of fun. Because there is this conception, and it's not an entirely misplaced one, that DMing is work.
Yeah.
It can be.
It's fun work.
Yes. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to feel like a chore.
Yeah.
So, DMing is work. It is. There's no way around that. I don't know what he's getting at. What he's trying to sugarcoat it, make it seem like something else. DMing is work. Okay, it is. But it is fun, and it has a fantastic payout at the end. You're going to do all of this work, setting up these sessions, setting up the campaign as a whole. It's gonna be work. It's not necessarily gonna be hard. Sometimes it's going to be hard work. Most of the time it won't be, but sometimes it will be. But it's going to be work. But that's okay. Because like I said, the payout is just top notch. Like you can't ask for a better payout for anything. Like but it will be work. And you're gonna have to put some work into it, especially in the beginning when you're first starting out and you've never done it before. It's gonna be work. For them to sit there and say, "Oh, it's not work," or whatever, is disingenuous. It is work, and that's okay.
Definitely not short.
and we don't want it to. And so seeding the book with ways to make it feel less like a chore and more like a fun engagement that you long for.
I love to add certain things at the beginning I don't know if I'm ever going to use. And so sentient magical item that they don't know is sentient can make you feel brilliant. 10 sessions in, 20 sessions in. You mean we had the artifact this whole time?
Yeah.
And that you know that I like timey-wimey stuff. I'll put mysterious cloaked figures on like a boat with them or like in close proximity and they never see who those people are. Well, if I want them to time travel back and to be those people in the cloaks.
Time travel again,
I know.
Todd.
But what if the villain was on the same boat ride the whole time? Like you find out like everyone was here. They're like just
Here's a hook you can steal.
Yeah.
An item they've had in their possession is sentient. They don't know it. And it's been telepathically communicating information that is gleaned from the party to a secret enemy nearby.
That's awful.
Isn't that awful?
I guess I could imagine that as like a hyper intelligent, the One Ring that is organizing things behind everything just to get itself to either its master or whatever it wants.
Yes, exactly. I ran an adventure once where the party found a sentient ring that contained basically the spirit or a fragment of the spirit of a court jester who was murdered by an evil king. And all it basically did was maneuver the party into confronting and killing the king.
Oh, that's perfect.
As a form of vengeance, without telling them who or what it was.
I also love when villains become part of the party somehow. That always causes a weird friction, like they need to work with a villain.
Yeah.
After they've defeated the villain, and then like the next couple of, I call them episodes in my head. I can never stop because I've been live streaming so many years.
Yes. Well, a DM is like a showrunner in effect.
Yeah.
Essentially, a campaign can be structured a lot like either an episodic or a serialized show. So episode is not we even say in the new DMG, that's a perfectly decent way to refer to a session of play or a sort of discrete length of the campaign.
Yeah, I always ask, though, like, why do you love doing this so much? I think this has ruined me as a player in some ways because I need to change characters so often because the addiction for being a dungeon master sometimes is you get to play so many characters all at once. It's an amazing experience.
Yeah. I think for me, it's the ability to wear so many hats that it never gets dull. You're never just doing one thing.
Yeah.
To your point, you're sort of any turn in which the players are not acting is your turn.
Yeah.
And you're sort of trying to keep the pace going. You're trying to keep things exciting. You're also a rules referee when necessary, if you feel comfortable enough to be that. You're also an improviser. You're trying to stay a pace or two ahead of the action to try to foresee where things are going to go. You're a content creator. You're a auteur, a director, an editor.
Yeah.
You're cutting things out of the game to keep things moving at a certain pace. You're advancing the storyline more quickly sometimes to gloss over the parts that are less interesting or less critical. The fact that you've got all of these different hats that you're wearing, I think is probably the sexiest thing about DMing to me.
I was a journalist for years. I paint, I draw, and some of the proudest moments I've ever had artistically has been being a dungeon master.
Yeah.
So many of them.
Yeah. And the other thing about dungeon mastering is everybody's got different sort of levels of strengths in all of those different things.
Yeah.
One DM might be a brilliant improviser. Another might be just be able to brilliantly embody the characters that they're bringing to life because they're such a natural actor. Other DMs are just really good with prep and keeping the game on track. Others are great with turns of phrase and describing things to make the world come alive in players' imaginations. Rarely is a DM great at all of those things, and that's perfectly fine. So if you've got a shortcoming in one area, you can make up for it in another,
Absolutely.
which is great.
Yeah.
That's a unusual situation. One of the things I like to tell new DMs, and this is codified in the 2024 DMG as well, is you don't have to be a master of the rules.
No. You can learn as you go.
You can learn as you go, and if you got a player who's actually really good at the rules, you can lean on them.
I heavily recommend against that. It's not that I don't trust my players, right? When I first started DMing, I had a player that had been playing for longer than me, years longer than me. And he wasn't particularly a rules lawyer, but the fact that I kept asking him questions about the rules, he ended up started like taking advantage of that, doing things that weren't technically allowed by the rules, but I didn't know any better. And he said, "Oh no, this is okay, the rules." And I'm not saying that everyone would do that, but they tend to feel like they're in charge. They can do whatever they want, and it sometimes they'll take advantage of your naivete, and sometimes, and this is a lot more common and a lot more frustrating, they'll develop main character syndrome. Right. They'll be like, "Well, I'm basically running this campaign. The DM keeps coming to me and asking me questions about the rules. So if I'm running the campaign, then my character's going to be, front and center, going to be star of the show. Like there is no main character. All of the players are the main characters. And for any one player to feel like that is just wild. I don't allow it. There's no main character, right? And the players that get main character syndrome are irritating. They'll irritate you as a DM. They irritate all the other players at the table. It makes nobody want to play with them anymore. And it can not only derail the campaign, it can stop the sessions entirely because nobody wants to play with somebody like that. And most of the time, people with main character syndrome don't realize that they've got it. They don't realize that they're trying to, push everyone else out and do everything. Sometimes they realize it and they just don't care. But relying too heavily on any one player could cause a plethora of issues that, honestly, it's better to just learn as you go. In any free time, just read the DMG, read the player's handbook so you know the rules a little bit better. That way you don't have to lean on any of your players when it comes to rules. It can cause some pretty serious issues that could bring about the complete stop of a campaign.
Players are participating in this enterprise and bringing the story to life as well. Often having players take on some of the DM roles is good.
No, it's not.
It's hard to explain, but you just made me realize something very important is, when we play D&D, we tend to remember those sessions for some reason because it engages our brain and we're imagining it better than real life sometimes.
Yes.
And there's real scientific reasons for why that is happening. And when I started learning to be a dungeon master, that was the same thing. It seemed scary to me to dungeon master, but I really wanted to do it. And I learned so much faster by just doing it. Not by trying to memorize all the rules in the DMG, because while I'm in the middle of a session, I look up a rule, I have to find what is happening with this condition right now while I'm imagining it, while we're telling a story. Then you're going to remember it for the rest of your life.
Here's the thing. Some of the more complicated rules and conditions and whatnot are put inside the DM screen. And you can make your own DM screen that has the rules that trip you up all the time. The DM screen is one so that you as the DM can fudge your rolls if you need to make sure you don't kill off the entire party. Your players can get mad at you for fudging rolls, but what they don't understand is you're doing it so that the campaign can continue. And most of the time you don't even need to fudge the rolls. Most of the time you're rolling bad. It's fine. It's whatever. But the main purpose of that DM screen is to give you a cheat sheet on rules and regulations and conditions. That's the point of the DM screen, right? So utilize it. I've seen so many DMs, especially lately, refuse to utilize the DM screen because so many players have made them feel bad for you because they're cheating. You're not cheating. You're using it for what it's for its intended purpose, which one, the rest of the players don't need to see your rolls. They don't. Okay, if I don't have a DM screen, I'm rolling on my phone. They don't need to see my rolls because a lot of time my rolls would kill one of them. And then nobody's having fun, right? Sometimes if they want a hardcore combat oriented campaign, then yeah, it's okay to kill them. In fact, it's okay to team kill them. It's fine. It's whatever. But most of the time, when you kill one of them, they'll get mad at you, right? It happens. If you don't want to fudge your rolls, it's going to happen more often, and that's okay, right? It happens. Players die. All right? They do. And they're going to get upset with you. But that's okay. Because a lot of the time, they died because they were doing something stupid. They went off gallivanting on their own into the middle of a encampment of enemies, right? It's fine. But your DM screen is to give you a cheat sheet for the rules. So use it. Don't worry about what your players think about you. You know, if they think you're cheating, they're thinking you're cheating no matter what. Okay? The DM screen is for cheat sheets. It's for you to have not all the rules memorized. So,
Yes.
Because that is how it gets burned into your memory. So I think all of the tools are absolutely in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and this is the best one we've ever had. But if you just start being a Dungeon Master, you're going to learn very quickly.
Yes. Yes. And one of the most important sidebars in the new Dungeon Master's Guide is the sidebar that says you are going to make mistakes. And that's
yep,
okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, I still make mistakes.
Yeah. One of the beautiful things about D&D is that if you make a mistake, you can course correct. When I was
Depending on how
working
bad
in
the mistake is.
Designing and editing and art directing, an important lesson I learned is, you'll put an issue out and you'll realize, oh, there's a gaffe or there's something bad in there. I wish I hadn't done it that way. You always have the next issue and then the one after that. And each one will just get better because you'll get more experienced in your role. You'll start to anticipate problems before they become a thing, and it's very much the same with DMing. Every DM, even experienced ones, will go, "Oh, I screwed up there. I didn't run that role properly.
Absolutely.
Or I misrepresented a character. I didn't play that scene out properly. I completely missed that whole monster's ability thing that it's supposed to do.
Oh yeah,
so
that
it was
happens
much
a lot.
weaker. Or I just ran an encounter that was boring.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, the next session, you have a chance to sort of redo it all. Or to go back and say, hey guys, I'm going to do a course correction here because this is not how this should have worked.
And that is a very also television mentality.
I would recommend against the course correction as well because once again, you're drifting dangerously into continuity error territory. If you make a mistake, it's okay. Just move past it. If something was supposed to be done a different way, it's okay. Just move past it. Roll with the mistake you made. That's why improvisation is the most utilized tool in the Dungeon Master's toolbox. You're going to need it for your mistakes, for players' mistakes, for players' decisions. It's a must-have for any DM. If it's a small mistake that you can go back and change without telling them that you're going back and changing it, that's okay. It's okay, you can do that. You can make it seem like it was something that happened when they weren't paying attention, right? But if you have to go back and course correct an entire scene, don't bother. Don't bother. And it's not like you shouldn't ever do that. I personally think you shouldn't ever do that, but it's going to get irritating because especially if you've got note-taking players, because they're going to already have the notes for the original scene. Now they've got to scrap all those notes and write new notes for that scene that you just course corrected. And it's like, just leave it as it is, right? You made a mistake. It's okay. Learn from that mistake so you don't make it again, but don't course correct it. That's that's pounding mistake with another mistake, It's just, you don't do it, So
we have another show in 30 minutes.
Yes.
You're only good as your last show. So you don't look at your mistakes as mistakes can feel too loaded of a term.
Right.
No, mistakes.
You always
it's
have
factual.
to improve.
Yes.
You just gotta keep doing it.
Right.
Thank you so much for talking about this. I always
Yeah. So this is overall.
Talking.
There we go. This is overall was a good. It was a good video. There's a lot of good tips to help new DMs. There's a couple, in my opinion, really bad tips. But ultimately, if you want to be a DM, but you don't think you're ready to just jump right into it, go to your local game store. And watch Adventures League. Participate in Adventures League, in fact, and just pay close attention to what the DM's doing. Most game stores have Adventures League every Thursday. Every state I've ever been in, it's been on Thursdays. So check with your local game store. I can almost guarantee you they have Adventures League, which is just for those of you who don't know, it's just playing Dungeons and Dragons with a bunch of strangers. It's a pre-made. They always run campaign modules, or almost always run campaign modules. That way, nobody's gonna be upset by like a bad story. It's all the same. Even though, in my opinion, most campaign modules are bad stories, but that's not the point here. It's a lot of fun, and you can learn how to DM by watching those DMs. So I heavily recommend that if dungeon mastering is something you want to go into, but you're not quite ready to just dive feet first into it. Then obviously read the Dungeon Master's Guide, read the Player's Handbook. When the Monsters Manual comes out in February, read that. You don't have to memorize everything. I don't have everything memorized, but rules that I have trouble memorizing, that I have trouble remembering, I have written down in my D&D binder, and that way it's all I have to do is open the binder and boom, it's right there, in that little envelope pocket thing, on the inside of the cover. It's right there, so I can look up the rule. I've got my DM screen that has some of the more complicated rulings and whatnot on it. I've also been playing for 13 years now, so I've got a little bit of experience memorizing stuff, which you may or may not have, right? So if there's a particularly complicated note and it's not on your DM or rule and it's not on your DM screen, write it down. Take notes, because that will help you. But overall, this is good advice for the most part. So, I mean, gold star. But if you learned anything, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I will have more videos coming out real soon. I know I had a fairly long break between videos there, and I apologize for that. They are going to start pumping out again real soon here, I promise. But thanks for watching.